introduction for the project. Welcome to the webinar. It's part of our Culture Builds Communities series. This is one of four virtual tours that we're doing of various cultural centers that reflect the sizes and goals of the people within our cohort. So now, Lydia, I'll turn it over to you and you can introduce your team and we'll get started.
Well, thank you for having us. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
I can.
I'm putting my thumb up, but I guess you might not see me. So yes, we can hear you.
Okay, cool. So thank you for having us. Welcome and thank you to ATOM's Community Builds cohort for including our facility in this opportunity to bring you Hocokata tea. Since our building has only been open to the public a little over a year, we thought it was important to recognize the multiple partners that have contributed to this project. In the 27 years since its conception, the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community has had 11 members of tribal government and 8 administrations, which also includes 15 members of the tribe's culture and historic preservation work group carrying through this project. Today in our presentation, you'll hear from our design team, Mr. Josh Shields, our landscape architect, Mr. Brian Hamlin, of work group, our design architect, Mr. Robert Brandwick, the architect of record, and Carolyn Wilk, project manager from Adopt Construction. So with that, I'll take it over to Brian. Oh, sorry, Josh.
Okay, I just have to pull this up quick. And I will try, I did see that chat come across, so I'll try to talk a little bit louder and try to acknowledge that. So if you still have trouble hearing me, just try to chat and I'll hopefully do a little bit better there. Okay. Thanks, Lydia, and the entire group for having us here today and giving us the opportunity to go through some of the site-related and design aspects of this project. It's definitely been a fulfilling experience, and it's been a long experience, so I'll try to move fairly quickly, but also know that some of my other co-presenters will be touching on items I may not get to. So where we really started was inspiration. Looking at the actual site, there was a lot of discussion about site selection, how it related to the community, which is growing both geographically as well as population, and really looking at how it fits into the context of that. So this site is more centrally located amongst all of the different land holdings that SMSC has, provides more of a centrally located location, and is also close to both one of the older neighborhoods within the community, but also some of the newer neighborhoods that are coming online. There are remnant prairie patches on the site that was selected. Deer and turkeys still roam the site. And we heard a number of stories from community members that were talking and recalling about hunting this land with family members, some who are still here and some who have passed. And through a number of months of dialogue with community members, it really helped to give us a richer understanding of what the community was looking for, how the facility would assist long-term on meeting those goals, not just for those that are here now, but 7 generations into the future. So some of those items included activity space for culturally relevant things such as sweat lodge, archery range. I remember discussions about lacrosse and wanting to have some open space where they could play some of those traditional sports. Really bringing the wildlife back to the space, and that is both plant species as well as birds, animals, and really looking at a connection to the water. So some of the other items on here, I'll let you kind of read through, but there are a number of different cues that helped us as a design team facilitate and get a better understanding of what types of spaces we might be creating for the cultural center and the expanded site around it. Out of those discussions really came two poignant thoughts. One is development that is in rhythm with nature, and then also a site and development that is along the river's edge. It's that understanding of the past and how we got to where we're at now, but then also understanding the complex world that we live in, how it relates to the community, the site, the building itself, and also how it propels and sets things up for the future. A quick image of the site is kind of shown here on the right. A portion of this was in trust already. So the blue line represents a portion of the site that was in fee being converted to trust. This was happening during the design phase. So we were looking at what aspects that actually may be with the design. Are we going to be able to meet just the community's ordinances and regulations, or are we also going to have a nod and meet some of the adjacent community ordinances and regulations? It was kind of all set up based on timing and when everything would go through. The site is now all in trust, but it's just one of those complex aspects that we were kind of confronted with during the conceptual and design phase. The other aspect of this site is it is within the valley of the Minnesota River. It was historically wider, and there were actually quite a bit of glacial deposits, which included sand and gravel. That really came into play and was beneficial for construction of this facility, provided that free draining material, but also assisted the community in some of their other endeavors that were taking place at the same time. They were able to mine some of the gravel and sand from this site and take that a short trip down the road to assist with some other projects that were going on, and then vice versa, we're able to import some of the materials from that site to assist with construction of this project. We did go through numerous layouts and concepts. I'm showing one of, I think, 5, maybe 6 that we had looked at some point or another. Really looking at view sheds, longer term, planning for future, and the community really helped us to solidify desired features, potential locations of the building on site, how things might fit, and even getting into some of the programming elements. And I will zoom in a little bit on the next slide. Oops. Or in a slide in the future, I'll zoom in a little bit to provide a little bit more information on that. Once we actually determined a location for the building on the site, which really coincided with the landscape that was there existing, kind of building and coming out of the land. We also really needed to look at the orchestration of how people are arriving to the site, how people are leaving the site, the impression that you get as you're driving toward the facility. And so what I have shown here are some of the different configurations that we looked at for parking, landscaping up front, service drive, and loading dock scenarios, looking at how things would fit with the land, but then also how things would fit with a potential public use of the space versus just community member use of the space. Throughout this entire process, there was an ongoing discussion of what would ultimately be housed in the building, and then who it would be available to. There was a strong desire for certain aspects on the community side that Brian will get into a little bit more when he talks about some of the architecture. But it wasn't really clear until further in that it would be appropriate, and they did want to include an aspect for public use, kind of that sharing of information, telling of that story. And so these configurations are looking both at parking to house the growing community, but also looking at what might be possible to provide a separation of a public entrance versus community space entrance. Some of the sketches that we did for community entrance garden space, both aesthetically, potentially ceremonial use, and then also to help break up the larger parking lot, is shown in these 3 images. We just looked at some different concepts, wanted to run those by the community and get a feel for what they might be interested in and what would be appropriate for incorporating into the final design. This one is very close to what was selected, but it's showing the Minnesota River as a processional space through its demonstration garden, and actually carries through drop-off space into the actual architecture and leaves the building at the upper terrace, the public side. So the river serves as kind of the conduit to the past, the future, but also provides this resonating element that is throughout. As promised, an image that shows a little bit more of what we were planning towards, the dialogue with the community members. And you'll see kind of a phase 2, some structures that aren't necessarily built now, but that the community really wanted to plan for. Make sure that what we did now would be able to accommodate future additions to the site when and if it becomes applicable. The cultural center facility, or the Hocokata Tea, is here in the middle. And then we have the radiated parking out from that. The other thing I will mention is that even though we're splitting up the presentation between site design and architectural building design, it really was an integrated approach throughout. We were working collaboratively with the architects, with the community members, really trying to hone that vision and really helping to bring it to fruition. So on this facility, looking at what vehicular drop-off would look like, how it relates to parking features. If there are opportunities for landscape that would, like I mentioned earlier, provide opportunities for ceremonial processions, or even just a demonstration of culturally significant plants, both serving a function, but also aesthetically breaking up the parking. There's still a number of parking stalls here, and you'll start to see that we have some numbers on these. It was very important to the community that it be able to provide a spot for all of the different community members to come to this facility, to park here, to interact with the different functions that are going on. This is really the first facility they have where they all are able to meet in one location. And so that was a really important aspect, and we really worked hard to try to figure out what that would look like, and also provide opportunities to expand those opportunities if they need to in the future, look at those expansions. The other thing through this is really capturing site design that integrates with architecture and interior spaces, and then vice versa, working with the architecture and as it flows out of the building. So looking at a lot of different complex items and then how do they fit together. One of the aspects that really hit home early for us was the cultural significance of the the spring equinox and the rising of the sun and that east-west line. So this building and site features were actually established off of that line. The point of this demonstration garden is along the axis of that east sunrise and spring, goes through the center of the place of gathering of the Hocokata, and then actually terminates in the teepee number 2, which is attached to the facility and is the honor teepee. And then consequently, we also have a parallel line that starts at the public entrance to the facility at the upper plaza, and then carries through to the middle of teepee number 4, which is the language teepee. But it was an important aspect to make sure that we carried that throughout. Some of the graphics we provided tried to showcase what the features would look like. It's kind of a SketchUp model / Axon, so it's really providing that simulated 3D view. You've got the building here, and then this one happens to demonstrate some of the different gathering spaces. You've got the upper plaza, which is more of that public facing. There's a set of stairs here you can't see, but a grade change. And then all of these would be community member facing. So you have that demonstration garden, you've got that drop off area, you have an outdoor cafe and kind of a transition space from the building to the site in the parking lot. And then you also have another transition with some low berms that really kind of creates that hallway and caters the sequencing as you're going around the building to the backside, or more of the living room space for the community members. Another view looking more at the larger site starts to showcase the access to water. And this changed quite a bit during the conceptual phase, you know, from more of that drainage ditch as it started to really a larger lake, a linear lake, but a larger lake, providing pedestrian access across that, looking at weir walls that capture the water and have it like a waterfall acoustically, or that kind of pool out into cascading pools as it makes that transition, looking at opportunities to treat the water, celebrate the water, and really to celebrate wildlife that are coming back to the site that hadn't been there for a while. All through the site, you also see different programming opportunities, whether that be gathering spaces, more formal, informal, potential for archery range. Some of these things have been constructed to date, and some of these are more future phases that are considered as part of the design process. This is probably a little bit hard to read. I know that the legend on the right is a little bit better, but we even went into the aspect of talking about materials, looking at sustainability and maintenance aspects of these, and trying to figure out that priority or that categorization of what different materials would be and where they would be around the facility. So you've got a bituminous or asphalt trail coming in from the east and some of the adjacent neighborhoods, as well as on the south side, coming to the facility and then making a transition to concrete around the actual facility. Something's a harder scape, more seasonal use, moving on to crushed limestone trail, still provides that accessible pathway, but is turning into a little bit more natural material that provides a loop around the lake. Also provides an access up to the, that upper portion, and then also to the water's edge, a trail that connects down to a beach on that lake or pond. Then as you go further out, and as the prairie here to the west is restored and grows in a little bit better, that opportunity to mow in additional trails that can be more of an informal use and really expand the use of the site. And we will get into a little bit, but there are also some mulch paths that get into some of these larger garden spaces. I think I talk about on the next slide. And so these provide kind of an informal way to get from point A to point B, but also to harvest some of the plants that are planted in here. It was really important as we were going through and talking with community members to provide opportunities to showcase some of the culturally significant plants and have those available for teaching, for use in crafts, to really make sure that information is kept and it's not lost, but it's passed on. So these these boxes to the right have a number of different species. I know you're not able to read those. I'm not either. But those were weaved throughout these 4 different spaces. You've got this Grand March garden that has a combination of a lot of different plants. But then you also have a meditation garden. And we worked with the community members to figure out what species might fit in that space. Medicinal garden, and looking at species that may have been used with medicinal purpose. And then even into edible craft garden that's down here within the building, there's kind of craft spaces and craft rooms in here. So these become opportunities to go out, to harvest those plants, to bring them back in, or to take the students out in the space, work within this detached teepee, and then work on crafting what you might be working on. So really kind of working on those and figuring out what that might look like. Kind of the next piece of that, as we were getting closer to construction, was figuring out what exactly we wanted to be putting in, but who might be overseeing those opportunities. So these garden spaces that I just pointed out, both around the front of the building and the back side of the building, those species, there was a real interest and desire for some of the community members to have an opportunity to plant some of those, which wouldn't be as easy to do if everything was installed by a contractor. And so some of these spaces, the community actually took over ownership of providing the plants, those plants, and then also working with staff to assist
Hold on one sec. I'm in a little webinar thing.
Assist with the staff in order to help with installation of those. View sheds and throughout, we tried to come up with images to demonstrate how the facility would look once it's installed. Here was one of those images, is looking at the view shed corridor from the pathways over on the west side, looking back to the facility, the use of the water, and then also the restored prairie and how that might look. I should have, knowing that we're doing this now, I should have almost done one with snow, because I know that we had some snow on the ground. But some of the features on these last 2 slides were ones I wanted to highlight. The importance of water. We actually developed some weir walls that this one is showcasing some cascading pools that would be visible from a pedestrian bridge, and also provide different qualities of habitat and access for wildlife in the community. And the last slide shows some of the images from, some of them from construction, some of them from projects that are ongoing and haven't been installed yet, but then also highlighting the facility, how it sits on the site, kind of cleaning up some areas where we retained some oak trees and are looking at more of the oak savanna parking lots and how they fit in, and then just the water and how it kind of enfolds the entire site and provides those opportunities for community members to really come together and celebrate both the history that is brought into the state, but then also looking forward to the future. And with that, I am going to pass this on to Brian, who is going to be able to talk a little bit about some of the design aspects and the architectural pieces.
Thank you, Josh. as my presentation pulls up. Thank you everyone for this fantastic opportunity to share with you all of our work. We're very honored to work on this project, and I'd like to convey a little bit about the 16th month and longer design process for this project, gleaning over approximately 50 PowerPoints, many of which included presentations by Josh and other team members along the project. I thought I would just give you an overall timeline and how we designed the project, how we worked with the goals, and how we communicated that design. The project started its first meeting, as you see on this slide, on January 18th of 2015. And actually, the master plan for the community was completed the year prior, which identified the site for this project. The Cultural Center was the first built project from the master plan work. Immediately on that date, on January the 8th, we started analyzing the schedule for the next 5 to 6 months. And you can see here we're tracking opportunities to meet with the steering committee and community input. On that chart is general council meetings, work group meetings. Right below that, you can see tours are integrated to tour successful projects across the country and what they had experienced during their design and construction and living with their completed facilities. And we're also tracking all the other technical issues on the bottom of the chart here during the overall design process. Josh touched up much on this in his presentation, but this initial study was analysis of site constraints, and you can see the graphics on the right, A, B, and C, are considerations of whether the building would be phased, whether it would be combined with other programmatic elements from the master plan that were identified for this site. But a lot of discussion, a lot of work on, as Josh mentioned, adjacent land use, transportation, the master plan for the roadways, a very large involved project, considering all the scope that was involved, not only with the architecture and interiors, but the entire site. The goals were primarily established during the master plan work the previous year, and essentially the 5 main goals that are identified here: provide programs that encourage and foster arts, crafts, traditions, and culture for the community, capture the oral history of the community, determine ways to partner with other Dakota tribes and other tribal visitors and First Nation visitors to the facility, and create an interactive cultural center. That was a living cultural center that was constantly growing and integrating, exploring new integration technologies for the community members. And of course, the goal number 5 here is to restore the use of Dakota language and ensure for the future of the community's members. Throughout all the presentations, we would go back to the goals, and this was just a general reminder of how we started the project, which had come from, as I mentioned, the master plan, some precedent imagery or concept imagery of how architecture would weave itself into the landscape was early on considered into the project. And as Josh mentioned, this becomes the new center of the community, new place of gathering, was very important through the overall project, considering sustainable aspects in the design and maintaining inspiration and unity for 7 generations, a building that reacted to the site, that was of the site, and inclusive of interaction possibilities on exterior design, landscaping design, as Josh just presented, and interior design. With that, building tours started happening that same month. Now we're on January 28th, and many facilities, fantastic facilities, were toured here: Southern Ute Cultural Center, the Heard Museum, Museum of Northern Arizona. The community selected which museums they'd like to see, and everything. It was such a fantastic experience to spend the day at these facilities, and these happened to be the 3 that I was with the community. And we learned so much about the overall first impression of architecture on site, the experience of guests arriving to the facilities, the experience of tribal members using the facilities, maintenance aspects, materials that worked and did not work, collections areas, signage, lighting. It was just really informative. And every facility taught us a lesson on how the design process worked for them, what materials that formed challenges for them and what they would do different and what they were planning for future expansions.
Say, who all participated in the site visits?
Was that not primarily members of the Culture and History Preservation Group?
I'm just asking because we're in the middle of a design process with a couple of tribes, and we would like to do these site visits, but we're doing these visits virtually instead because of the, the situation.
Understood.
But
It was primarily the Cultural and History Preservation Group, but several other community members. The attendees changed as the tours went from facility to facility.
and you as the architect went with them?
Yes, we did.
Yeah, great.
Documented all their questions. Everyone took ample photos, each of us that were on property, and videos, and reviewed floor plans when possible while on site.
Great.
Accelerating possibly quickly, actually, but following the schedule, right after site tours, we returned to a steering committee meeting here on the 19th of February, 2015, with 5 different initial concepts for architecture. And these came from conversations we had with the steering committee and other members of the community. We had the opportunity to explore many advantages of being with the client, with talking circles, and we had attended several powwows over the years, and we got to very honored to look at the actual artifacts and photograph them. And as we looked at these photographs, and we started questioning the possibility of, could the actual architectural design and interior sequencing be found in the pattern language of these materials and these fantastic pieces of art? And the answer was yes. The design came from all of our quality time that we spent researching and not only just with artifacts and with the community, but walking the site with the community and considering, as Josh just mentioned, view corridors and how the building would speak to the land. Some preliminary site photos that we're looking at right now. These were printed, as you'll see in a moment, and posted for the community to access during the design process. And then many of you are familiar with the term inspiration imagery during design, or concept imagery, precedent imagery. It has many names, but we looked at thousands of different images and from around the world and found architectural examples that seemingly grew from the earth and spoke to the surroundings in a seasonal relationship that allowed the users to experience the changes in season and appreciate that through glazing, large amounts of glazing areas that you'll see in the final design. Some of these images were deemed inappropriate at the final design solution, but some retained relevancy throughout the whole process. And then here we are at the concepts. Concept 1, as it was termed in February of 2015, was considered the core of the community. And with this, you can see a large scale abstracted teepee form at the center, which is at the place of gathering, which is considered the core at this part of the project development. Of course, this represents the historical importance of the teepee to the community, but it also acknowledged the previous cultural center, which had a teepee structure. And for many of you who are familiar with Mystic Lakes Casino Hotel, there's a light sculpture on top of the resort, which is just down the road from this cultural center. And so there's a lot of references here to the history of the tribe and of the community and the tribal expression of themselves in symbolism, in architecture, and in lighting sculpture as at the resort. The second concept was bison concept, and really that was representing the cultural significance of the bison to Dakota culture, both historically and in the strength it conveys about the community's endurance and future. This is a very abstract concept. It was woven into the landscape, and it utilized wood and steel and large expansive areas of glazing to really blur the lines of architecture, interiors, and exteriors, and nature. The third concept was termed feather or leaf by many of the community members. And it really was an abstracted symbolic element laying quietly on the land. And again, just a gentle, be as graceful as we could with the introduction of architecture onto the land. Yet it created a fantastic, intriguing, experiential experience sequencing of interior design. You could see on the bottom left image that private, public and private there's different sequencing through this concept design leading to the place of gathering, which opened up to the west on the site. The bridge concept was an abstraction of literally a fallen tree over a creek. And the question here was, could an architectural expression of a bridge over the waterway create a unique spiritual connection between guest and tribal visitor, community member that was walking through the building, a different relationship that was much more personal and much more unique than rather typical, as we've seen in other facilities, sometimes introduced water feature. This was more integral to the overall existing waterways that were being reestablished. The final design presented that day was probably very familiar to you now. Here it is in its infancy in February of 2015 along the river's edge. Josh mentioned this. This is in his presentation. The concept image at the top left is pretty self-explanatory. The architecture here is very abstract, undulating architectural form seemingly growing out from the earth. The teepee forms are very abstracted here, yet they provide an overall sequence, and clearly you're starting to see some public and private separation in the design. Now we're going to accelerate a little bit and move to February of 2015, and the first community design charrette was structured on that day. We used a large-scale print of the overall site, and all these graphics that we're referring to are sometimes hard to understand, but having an interactive piece, large scale, where you can write on it, make notes, and just express your thoughts. And then we had scaled elements that represented the concepts I just discussed, and they could be moved on the site in different proximities in different locations. And we talked about all the parameters of the view corridors and how architecture would be introduced. And this was a very useful tool, a very great interactive day for obtaining knowledge about the tribe's vision, the community's vision, and the essence of the spirit of the whole project. The first major general council meeting occurred on April of 2015. And by that time, we had centered down to two main designs that you're familiar with now. On the left, you'll see what was considered then concept one, the core of the community. And on the right, the early form of along the river's edge, which is a more single level design. This is the room I mentioned earlier, which was set up for the community to visit. Had a great schedule of opening times for them to come in and interact and leave notes. And Rob was in that room quite often. He'll discuss that in a moment. But this contained that interactive piece that we were using, and then around the room was all these presentation boards that I was presenting earlier for everyone to leave their notes on. And we had so much design information and presentations. We had architecture, Josh and all of his beautiful work with the landscaping design, and interior design was represented, and everything was here for everyone to just leisurely process at their own rate. I'll put it that way, because as a designer, sometimes our language and our visualizations are a little difficult to understand and in rapid presentations. One interesting graphic we utilized was this graphic, which showed the different concepts in relationship to other familiar elements within the community lands. On the far right, you can see the resort tower and the hotel tower, and here in the middle is concept one, and over here is concept two. Great reference piece for everyone when we're talking about architectural scale. And now we come to the final design decision, which, as you can see, is July 14th, 2015. Not a PowerPoint and not a lot of words. This was a self-contained video that I merely introduced as to what its content was, and it was not narrated. It had text pieces, but as you can see from the screen capture on the top left, it covered the 7 sequences of the entire design process that I just quickly went through. And it contained floor plans and "you are here" type visualizations, which utilized animation to show interior sequencing and the overall architectural experience on the site. The steering committee on meeting on the 7th of, now we're in 2016, really starts to finalize the design. And there were numerous designs here in 2016 for the final process of each space. I just selected this one to show you how the final decisions were made after we reviewed all the concept information. But often our language as designers is confusing. And here we are in every meeting in 2016 as we finalize the design. We're using diagrammatic floor plans, which are color coded, excuse me, for key references on public level versus private level. As I toggle the levels of the building here, we start identifying some of those areas that Josh had mentioned, and everyone will elaborate on in a few moments with the rest of the presentation. And of course, we use 3D because we are always thinking in 3D, and sometimes that's hard to process, especially in a very fantastic, unique building like this building is in this design. And these were also animated, so it became quite clear about the sequencing that Lydia will discuss later on. And here at the end of my portion of the presentation, precedent imagery comes back in. Each space had a mood board, you might say. What was the spirit? Here we're looking at the river gallery. What was the vision for this space? And this is how we first thought this space would open up to nature through ample amounts of undulating glazing that morphed itself right into the landscape. And with that came, of course, animation and renderings of what the concept would be. And those were taken on the exterior. One more stop on the interior for the place of gathering. Many studies done here about the diversity of functioning that this space had, and the lighting and acoustics and that video wall in the distance that we can see in this simulation. This is a still from an actual animation. And then, of course, lighting studies on the exterior of the building, many daylight shots and renderings, but a whole sequence of studies of how the building would quietly exist on the waterway during the evening hours. With that, I'd like to thank you for opportunity to share this design process, and I'd like to turn it over to Rob and Carolyn, and they're going to discuss the construction timeline sequence.
There were some questions.
We'll hold the questions until the end of the presentations, if you don't mind.
Good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully everybody can hear me. My name is Rob Brandwick. I'm with HTG Architects, one of the partners and the project manager on this job, and also the owner's representative throughout the project. I want to cover one thing, and thank you, Brian, for a great presentation on the design process. Back in 2014, actually at the outset of this project, the community asked us to partner with the Worth Group on the design and interior design. HTG has had the opportunity to work with the community for the better part of 30 years on all of their non-gaming projects. And so we've been the architect of record on a lot of their projects, and they liked the fact that we were here in Minnesota close and could be kind of that boots on the ground, manage all of the process locally here, work through the construction sequencing, but then wanted us to partner with the Worth Group, who had also done some work on one of the gaming facilities and liked the features that they brought to the table as far as that and the master planning. So if people are wondering why there's two sets of architects, that's really the background to that. Also like to introduce Carolyn Wolf from McGuff Construction. She was the senior project manager, managing kind of the day-to-day construction activities. So I, again, like Josh and Brian, threw in a couple slides here, just some of the site as we showed up, what it looked like before construction took off. In the fall of 2016, there was a groundbreaking. Of course, every good project has to have a groundbreaking, so business council was in attendance. This is the current council that was in office at the time. There's a ceremonial shovel that was given as a gift to the community from one of the community members to the business council and the rest of the group. Here's a shot of some of the CHP and the group that was in attendance that day. Along with the groundbreaking in the fall of 2016, the site work started to begin, as Josh talked about. There was export of soil materials going off site for other projects. They were working on site utilities throughout that fall season. We get into winter of 2016. So Brian talked through about the design process. That was really getting us through midway through design development. We still had some ways to go. We had some discussions. So we were working on kind of that final design through the winter of 2016. And we're presenting that on and off to the Cultural and Historic Preservation Work Group for approval. Kind of consecutively at that same time, McGuff was actively estimating construction costs along the way so we could establish a budget with the client. Ultimately, that GMP budget was established and the Business Council granted approval for us to move forward on the final construction documents. So that was what we jumped into for the rest of spring of 2016 or 2017. Here's just some key stats for the kind of involvement of the project team. Worth Group Architects had just shy of 13,000 hours and 18 people over the course of time. HTG had 16 different folks at just shy of 12,000 hours. Our structural engineer, MEP consultant, and then Bolton and Mink with their civil engineering, landscape, and survey crew. So you can see there's a lot of hours. We've estimated that if you include all the other specialty consultants, we'd have been well over 50,000 hours. So.
Good afternoon. As Rob noted, McGuff Construction was awarded this project in the fall of 2016. As we entered into the spring of 2017, we continued the site work, stockpiling sand, and bringing in clay for the ponds. We also installed some of the curb and gutter to align our delivery roads with the parking levels and making sure that our path was consistent. We also started site utilities, bringing those towards the building and constructing some of the weir walls and starting to outline really that perimeter site work prior to starting with the footings and foundations. As we moved into the summer of 2017, our construction team mobilized on site. We started pouring the footings and foundations specifically for our tower crane. Our tower crane, it was about 200 feet in the air. It was erected to support our steel activities along with our concrete activities. Photos here showing that utilities are ongoing, bringing them from the surrounding areas to the site. And an aerial view just really starting to show the project outline, the structure outline coming to life with the footings.
Fall of 2017, footing and foundations continue on. Waterproofing areas that will be ultimately below grade is happening. Lots of foam work and rebar is being tied. One quick note, this is in the southeast corner of the building. This is the 190-degree corner on the exterior of the building. This is the southeast corner where the collections space is in the building. And the building is designed to have a knockout panel so we could expand. Ultimately, we assume that the collections will need to grow in the future. And so we've left a way to expand to the south, kind of around some mechanical equipment, but this is the 190-degree corner in the building. So it's kind of a piece of trivia that we like to talk about. The rest of the building is pretty much all curves everywhere you go on the exterior. So. We were also working on below grade utility work, so electrical, plumbing, rough in. They were pouring curved walls on the level 1. We were setting forms for pouring concrete decks for mechanical elevations and also getting ready for concrete pours of the upper level. You can see some of the piers for the place of gathering starting to take shape, the curved nature of the building going around following those.
We quickly entered into a Minnesota winter in 2017 with colder temperatures and plenty of snow. The photo shown here is taken from atop the tower crane. This is actually showing in the pour of level 1. You can see a lot of the rebar in place and then a lot of the conduit that's ran for power within the deck itself. As we were working on concrete, we were also setting the steel for the roof structure, starting on the south portion of the building and moving our way to the north.
Getting into spring of 2018, most of the steel erection is complete at this point. They're starting to work on roofing, exterior framing, interior framing on both the lower level and the upper level. Plenty of mechanical, electrical rough in along the way, so you can see some of the roof forms. You can see the second lift of concrete is poured on the place of gathering walls. On the slide on the right, you're seeing the framing for the curvature of the exterior soffit on the outside of the building that will ultimately engage with those 3 enclosed teepees. This is the kind of start to the river gallery. Here's an aerial shot from above. Place of gathering is the large circle on the lower right. You can see now that the upper deck has been poured for that stadium seating in there. Most of the metal deck is on, and we're just kind of waiting to get the glue lambs up there and do that final tie-in of the roof and move from south to north.
Summer of 2018, early May, the glue lambs arrived on site. Those are the wood beams that you can see within the picture. They're the structure of the roof in the place of gathering. We had to actually place a center piece of steel to keep that structure in place until all of the beams were set. Then we could take away that structure as they all locked into place. And then we were also working on exterior. You can see stone being put into place on the left-hand side of the photo or the slide. And then on the right-hand side, we're starting to install the sage glass along the river gallery. This is an electrochromatic glass, a very specialized system, but very important to the river gallery, allowing specific amounts of sunlight in depending upon the program use of that space. While working on the structure and enclosure, we were also working on mechanical electrical rough-ins on the interior. Photos here are showing the ductwork being put into place along with additional interior framing. We're also working within the bathrooms, finalizing plumbing rough-ins, and then overhead mechanical and electrical also. We haven't had a lot of photos yet of the teepees on the west elevation. So the picture on the left is the foundation for the teepees. You can see the anchor bolts stubbing out of the concrete. Those are ready to accept the steel poles that will be installed. The photo on the right is the blue duct, which supplies each one of the enclosed teepees with tempered air. That was one of the ways that we were providing conditioned air to the space. There's also in-floor heat within each one of the 3 enclosed teepees. Few more photos here, a view of the teepee foundations, and then looking out to the river gallery glass, the sage glass that I had mentioned previously. There's also a few photos that help capture the undulation of the soffits. They're both moving in a up-down direction and a in-out direction. So a fun challenge for those that were framing this structure and making sure that they were capturing the design intent. Another aerial shot as we are completing the foundations for the 7 teepees. 3 of those teepees, as I mentioned, are enclosed and tied into the building structure, and the other 4 are detached and open, so only having fabric at the top. This is a view from the east elevation. This is the main entrance for the public on the left-hand side of the photo, and then on the right-hand side, the lower level will be the main entrance for the community.
We're moving forward into fall of 2018. The 3 enclosed teepees will start getting constructed. Obviously, when you're trying to build an authentic teepee using conventional construction materials, there's some complications. How we're going to get all the parts and pieces to site? Can we fabricate it in such a manner that makes sense? And so ultimately, we had to separate what we'll call, in this case, the teepee crown or cap, separate of the poles and the structure itself. And so picture on the right, or the left, excuse me, is the cap, kind of staying there waiting to be installed. Picture on the right is with the poles installed, showing the crisscross nature of the assembly and then the first layer of fabric over the top. This aerial image shows kind of those 3 engaged or enclosed teepees as they touch the building, getting ready for fabric. Now at these locations, we're starting to stretch that fabric over it. It's a system, it's a 2-layer fabric system. First layer is stretched down on the inside, and then there's a set of cables going from the top down to the bottom of the angles, and that allows us to hold a separate layer of fabric off, so there's an air space between, but it's still allowing us to have that translucent look to that picture that Brian showed at the end of his slide, where you could kind of see the illuminated teepees at night. Also in fall, continuing masonry was completed. You're starting to see some of the waterways that Josh talked about coming in, not only at the public entry back out to the public parking, but that river walk or that river path coming in from the garden here into the place of gathering entrance. Moving into the inside of the building, this busy time of year, trying to get things open for the client to take the building over. Here's the front entryway. We have some custom light fixtures that replicate a little bit of their medicine wheel and the cardinal 4 directions. As you move in, the picture on the left is a shot of the 2-story lobby. This is kind of an open to below. And then the next slide shows you're looking up to the skylight above that opening. Also, obviously mimicking the medicine wheel that we just talked about. Image on the left is kind of at the below, now that the tower has been pulled out from underneath that compression ring holding the glue lamp members, and starting to do all the acoustic materials and lighting and HVAC up in that place of gathering ceiling. Picture on the left here is kind of as you came up the top of the stairs, going back towards the front entry, library gift shop. Is on the right here, entry to the place of gathering at the upper level. This is that river gallery rock that's been, come from the river path down below and has come up the stairs to lead you back out the building or in the building, depending on your orientation and direction. Just an example of a custom light fixture on the left in one of the offices and conference areas. I talked about that river gallery stone. We took that all the way up the stairs. You can see the 5 stones, different stones throughout the building, were kind of layered up in fashion to kind of represent the geological makeup of the earth that's within this site. And so picture on the right is another shot of the river gallery showing that sage glass now installed and operational. You can see it helps us control the lighting in there. We obviously can't put a good source of lighting control on a window that is segmented, also in an arch top. It was just going to be problematic to put any sort of lighting control. And so this way we can monitor and manage the light control into that space with the electrochromatic glazings. Here we're in the community dining room. There's a fireplace, a seating area in front of that to relax in the gas fireplace. If you spin around exactly from looking at the fireplace, you're looking back into the community kitchen. It's a demonstration style kitchen, so you can not only serve people and guests, but you can also do demonstrations and have people stand around this cooktop counter to kind of see what's happening and learn about traditional food preparation. Again, more custom light fixtures within the space. These would represent kind of the theme of a drum. Of course, we wouldn't be Minnesota if we didn't show you what this building looks like a little bit in the wintertime. This is that fall of 18, as pretty much all of the exterior work is wrapped up. We're just tucking in the teepees a little bit along the building and doing some of those final connections. Here's from the east side. Again, you can see that pathway in the sidewalk and the concrete. This is the place of gathering entry and our loading dock, again, tucked. It's a complicated site. Everything accesses it from the east, so you can't get to the building really from the west side. There's this big open prairie along with the county road. And so everything accessed from the east. So you not only have to have your public and private entrances, but you also have to have your service to the building. So became a challenge, but we worked around it, and I think it gave them a good solution.
As Rob mentioned, the winter of 2018, we were finalizing finishes, working on punch list, and preparing to turn the building over to the ownership group. Staff occupied the building mid to late December and started to populate the library and gift shop, along with moving into their office space on level 1. We're also doing the finishing touches within the place of gathering. As you can see here, the auditorium seating up top around the perimeter, and then a variety of ways to format the lower level seating depending upon the function. Their AV group started to move in as well, working with the different lighting controls and the large screen at the front of the place of gathering. The photo on the right is a shot of one of 3 display cases within the Hall of Dakota. We'll touch on those a little bit later, but those cases are used to showcase different memorabilia and historic items for the community members to come and learn more about their history and culture.
Also during the winter of 2019, the build out started by Split Rock Studios on the exhibit space. And so they had about a 3,500 square foot space, very tight for all the building that they needed to do for their exhibits and design and props and display cases. So here's just a few shots. And the one on the left, they're putting the mural on the wall. Here we're starting to build out some of the other sequences along the way, and you'll see more of this space as it gets completed when we watch the video. But you can see there's a lot of different activities going on, display cases, and you got people with lifts and things being built on the wall, cases being populated. Here's kind of a panoramic of the room. You're standing by one of the emergency exits looking back. The entries here on the left. There's a video space behind this green wall. Then you come around and you're making your way kind of in this clockwork path around here. And this is that display case that divides the center of the space.
Spring of 2019, the staff has moved into this space, getting comfortable with their new surroundings. They've also started to move collection items into the building, and we are finalizing the 4 open teepees. The photos here are of the river gallery. Furniture has been moved into the space. The photo on the right, you can see the entrance into teepee number 4. This is the language teepee. All 3 teepees are accessible from the river gallery space. Here are a few photos of construction during the putting together the open teepees. As I mentioned, there are 4 of those. The top half is the PTFE material, just a single layer, not the double layer that we have at the enclosed teepees. This was relatively simple in comparison to tying in the 3 enclosed teepees into the building. The shots here give you a really nice view of the west side of the structure, showing the teepees almost complete, also showing the pond and the area used around the entire facility.
Summer of 2019, the finish line is in sight. We're putting the landscaping in. Like Josh said, some of that work was done by staff, some of it was by community members, but continues to kind of populate around the building. Site furnishings are installed, bike racks, benches, garbage cans, all that kind of stuff. Some of the gardens have been populated now. Here's that Grand March garden coming in from the parking field. A couple aerial shots. This is right before grand opening, the parking field. Actually, in one of Josh's slides, there was kind of future expansion of the upper public parking lot. the community actually decided to open that up right away and get that built. So when they paved this all out, they extended it out right away, just in the sense of we knew we were going to fill it pretty quickly. So really came together nice. Here's that pond side starting to develop. It's a great shot of one of the amenities, the little beach area that Josh mentioned, and pathways and different gardens along the back. Here's the front entry again, that garden, Grand March area. Here's the public entrance, the public parking area, loading dock down the middle, and then place of gathering for the community members to enter in the space. And of course, the backdrop is the water and the 7 teepees facing that water. This was all leading up, obviously, to the grand opening. There was a ribbon cutting and a grand opening event for local dignitaries, invited guests, construction, design team members, community members that day. And so they did a ribbon cutting, of course, and then moved us into kind of wrap up of construction. So.
A few construction statistics. It was an 18-month construction schedule. We poured over 7,000 cubic yards on site within those 18 months, and approximately 600 tons of reinforcing steel was within those walls and decks. McGough contracted with 43 different trade partners and had over 200,000 work hours on site. A few of the challenges that we encountered on this unique building was forming and pouring radiused walls. It's very standard to be pouring walls at 90-degree angles and not having to work through placing a door frame in a radiused wall or running ductwork through a radiused wall. So there's a lot of work with our structural engineer and Rob's team to work through those items. The photo shows the top half of the place of gathering. You can see within the concrete wall, there are steel embeds. Each one of those steel embeds weighed approximately 2,000 pounds. And those were there for the connection of the glulam beams. So working through that again with the structural engineer was a unique process and something that my team and I haven't worked through in the past. So a good lesson learned on that one. There's also the coordination with the enclosed teepees. 3 of the enclosed teepees met and needed to coordinate with the sage glass along the river gallery. So understanding the different material types, different planes of structures, all having to come together to make sure we didn't have any water issues or any tempered air issues. Those are just a few of the items that we worked through with the design team and the ownership group.
To wrap up our part of the construction timeline, at the grand opening that day, there was not only the initial preview to the community members for the exhibit area, but it also opened to the public who was in attendance that day. So we have the kind of front entry up lobby, 2-story space. The skylight is really right above us. So it's a pretty dynamic space, but this is a close-up of the front entry to get into the exhibit space. And here is some of the community members enjoying their first looks at the exhibit area. With that, that wraps up our construction timeline, kind of from fall of 2016 through summer of 2019. I'm going to hand it back to Lydia. Thank you much for your time today.
Hello. Hopefully you can hear me better now.
We can, Lydia.
Awesome. Awesome. So I wanted to take you a little bit into the programmatic use of this facility. We come together to interpret and encourage traditional Mdewakanton Dakota cultural heritage, language, and history by sustaining this inherent knowledge for its community members through exhibition, preservation, and education. When I was doing some work, collaborative work with the Midwest Art Conservation Center, they said that it was key in our mission statement that we do talk about preservation, and that will be looked at in terms of if you want to seek funding for the collection, that's important to have that in in your mission statement. As we've discussed multiple times, this is our Culture and Historic Preservation Work Group. Planning and development, community input is vital. On the left, you see the work group here who sat diligently through the design development of the facility and also through the exhibit design of design development for the exhibit as well. In retrospect, I think that I would recommend that the exhibit process happens earlier than you anticipate. There's a lot of key elements that happen, and I think that in some of that they would have thought that some things that they'd like to have a little bit changed. If you all were part of the Split Rock presentation, we talked a bit about that. On your right here is some of the members from the CHP visiting the site as during construction. Planning and development. Once again, after the approved resolution from 1993, they were able to formulate a master plan in 2014. And that entailed, working on a budget, policy development, collections planning, education programming, and really determining amenities from the standpoint of what the community needed and what they were going to provide the general public. On your right are 3 members of our CHP work group signing the one of the beams, and then on the bottom we have Josh working on the site. Here's an example of our events and timeline tracking. So as you can see, there was not only the construction that was ongoing, but we also had the exhibit that was in production as well. And that included, our trips to the Smithsonian, finalizing production, case layouts, fabrication, shipping, installing the exhibit, working with the dedicated people at NMAI, doing AV walkthroughs, in addition to, at the same time, our AV Richard Lewis Media Group, which is a subcontractor through Split Rock Studios, to acquire all the audio and video components of the exhibit. So what was unique about this project is we did not hire outside actors for this. These were all voices from the community. And for the most part, they were reading lines that as direct descendants. So that made that really unique. And also some of the scripts that were developed were written from the Dakota War. They were prisoner letters, and those were the first time they'd ever had those translated in Dakota. So that was a very unique part and a process to be able to see and to be able to witness, because the people that read those lines were direct descendants. In addition to the exhibit work, we had the artifact collections, which had a lot of movement at the time. We were acquiring staff, shipping and receiving, installing here on site for the facility, packing, moving, a complete comprehensive inventory of the collection, which was the first time, working on acquiring a contractor to come in and help. We hired ArtServe, we were fortunate enough to have a firm here in Minneapolis that could come and work with us. The move didn't take quite as long as I had anticipated. Unfortunately, we had to do the move in a Minnesota end of the Minnesota winter, so that wasn't very fun. But on top of everything, we also integrated our entire collection into a new database. So the collection is currently not online, but we are working out some various other issues that we have just internally with descriptions, and that could be a whole other topic as well. But that was all in conjunction with the construction. and staffing and developing programming to be up and ready when the facility is ready to be opened. So there was a discussion on providing an organizational structure of our facility. If you notice, the people in the green, the individuals that are noticed in the green are employees of the Cultural Resources Department. The general manager, myself, I report to our tribal administrator and the business council, the CHP, which is the advisory work group that I had referred to. Acts in an advisory capacity. Everything pretty much goes through the CHP in our monthly meetings, and that gets transferred onto the administrator and the business council. So the individuals are currently our education engagement supervisor, which oversees our cultural interpreter. Cultural interpreter is our person who does all of our tours, and our community outreach specialist. This person is a unique role since we only provide programs for the most part to the community. So the community outreach person is charged with just Dakota community-based programs. A curatorial assistant, collections manager, and an office manager. The office manager is also our events and, to a bit of a degree, our operations manager as well. We do have a maintenance person and an environmental service person here on site. Our horticulturalists and landscaping individuals, they come as needed. We do have a security guard here on site, but we also have information, IT people and AV support from gaming, in addition to marketing department that supports us on graphic design, communications, and digital and project initiatives. Our cultural resources director, who's been working on this project since the very beginning, also acts as our tribal historic preservation officer. And we've also just recently acquired from our education department a language instructor and a language support specialist. In terms of operations, so it's best to have a determined community access and public access. We understand some of the challenges of having a beautiful facility and the public wanting to be all over it. So we were a little concerned that, how, for the most part, myself, how are we going to keep people from wanting to access the river gallery, wanting to wander around on the trails, just the requests from the tours. How are we going to provide the extra programming, the extra amenities for school groups when they come, because typically a group wants to come and they'll usually make a day of it, and they'll want to have lunch and usually have a program. And we're slowly integrating on how that works. Noticing that it's probably a little easier to have them come down the elevator than go through 50 kids down the stairs of the river gallery, because a lot of people kind of want to get deterred. I think that one of the other things that I want to stress is keeping a direct collaboration with the Human Resources Department. If this is a new project, it's important that they know what these positions that you're creating are and what they do. And I keep running into these scenarios with other tribes that I've worked for, especially when it came to a collections manager, because they always assume that that's a finance person. So developing public programming, education, collections, database management, repatriation, traditional care. I know we didn't talk about this in great respects, but we do have a sacred vault that houses our sacred and ceremonial items. Limited access to that space, myself and our cultural resources director. We do have various times throughout the building where we recognize our traditional care and process, and how we articulate that is unique to every single tribe. Facility reporting. So the general facility report with the AAM, this is a 35-page report that's utilized by the museum industry to prove your facility meets the best standards for an object loan. It is critical to review during planning, design development, and construction. As you see on your left, those are the requirements that the National Museum of American Indian Smithsonian typically when we were looking for doing object research, the Minnesota Historical Society was under a moratorium, so we weren't even allowed to consider any of the objects from there. But they will ask for a facility report. And what was unique, what I enjoy about this is it's a buy-in from all your other departments. So your finance department, your surveillance, security and surveillance department, your insurance people, maintenance, public safety, they all have to sign off on this agreement to understand and the importance of maintaining a building of this size and how important it is to have objects returned to the community. With that, they also request a facility report, and here I've provided the report key. They've asked for object loan locations, which are in the yellow areas here, food and drink, guard stations, fire extinguishers, which is in here and here, and the the travel path of your object loan. So they're gonna build the curation committee with NMAI. We'll go through these documents, and it would also help is having a collections management policy, which was the first time that the community had one since purchasing the collection, which we'll talk a little bit about in the video. But it was nice to have developed a standard statement and develop a scope on how the community was going to collect. So that brings us to planned use, traditional and contemporary arts, multimedia projects, traveling exhibits, research, performances, tours, language programs, AV sound, outdoor nature programming, tours, community gathering, meeting spaces, teaching indigenous foods, and community kitchen. So with that, thank you for listening to our presentations. And now we can present our virtual tour of Hocokata tea. Let me pull it up here. Where is it? Oh, that's not it. Sorry. I don't know why it's not showing this one.
Can everyone hear the sound?
No.
No,
Okay,
no.
okay. Lydia?
Yes.
The sound doesn't seem to be working. So let's see. We had this issue before and somebody helped us fix the sound, and I can't remember what we did.
I wasn't involved in actually solving the problem, but apparently if you click out of share your screen and then click back into it, one of the options like way down hidden somewhere is share your volume too.
Okay.
Okay. Great. All right, hold on. Oh, there we go. Share computer sound. Hey, learning things. I'll start it over again.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Keith Anderson. I serve as chairman for the Shakopee, Mdewakanton Sioux community. We are a federally recognized sovereign Native American tribe in Minnesota. Thank you for joining us for a virtual tour of our culture center, Hocokata. We are honored that the Association for Tribal Libraries, Archives, and Museum has named Hocokata one of the top 10 museums and cultural centers in the country.
Hamatakiapi. My name is Lydia Forhorns, the General Manager for Hocokata. As we bring you an inside look into our building, it's key to remember the fundamental aspect of this community-based design was developed to be strongly connected to the traditional culture of Dakota people. Through the years of defining the need to provide a space for community gathering, council governance, arts-based placemaking, and language learning, it was vital that our built environment acknowledges the 7 directions and the iconic symbolic importance of the circle within Indigenous architecture. All of the exterior doors, main gathering space, teepees, and our 19-foot medicine wheel skylight, which illuminates the entryway rotunda, are aligned to the 4 directions. You'll also hear in our creation stories the relationship to water, which was represented in the river gallery and our landscape architecture as they camp near the water's edge. We are happy to bring you Hocokata, a building that mends traditional purpose into contemporary life as a place connected to history, culture, and values of Dakota people.
Hamitakiapi, and Petu Kinde Nino Ashtato, Wana Hocokata dead yahi, Shakopee Mdewakanton Dakota Oyate, Yahipi Kinwashte, Dakota Chaje Mitawa, Wambadi Aumani, Washichu Chaje Mitawa, Steve Flores, Damakota, Shakopee Makoche Imantahan. Hello, my relatives. Today is a good day. The Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community welcomes you to the Hocokata, which means the lodge at the center of the camp. My Dakota name is Traveling Eagle. My English name is Steve Flores. I am Dakota and a member of the Shakopee Mdewakanton Sioux community. I serve on the Culture and History Preservation Work Group. Having this building and land for the community offers us a place to come together and share in our Dakota Wichohan, our Dakota ways of life. It's important that we continue the ways of our ancestors by keeping our language, song, dance, and teachings alive so they will be here for generations to come. One of the ways we are achieving this is through strengthening our Dakota language. We say Dakota Iyapi ki Ninawakan. The Dakota language is very sacred to us. It is at the center of all that we do. Chante Itahan Wopida Tanka Unkinichiapi. From our heart, we all really thank you.
Minnesota is a Dakota place. The word Minnesota is derived from the Dakota words Mini Sota, land of clear water. As a people, we have met many challenges, yet in spite of all the hardships faced, we have worked to sustain and build a community that follows the Dakota values that our people have always practiced. Wo'ohada, respect. Wowachbana, humility. Woksape, wisdom. Wochekye, prayer. Wowaonshida, caring and compassion, Wowichaka, honesty and truth, Wo'okia, generosity and helping. We continue to live by these values today, and for generations we have worked hard to preserve Dakota lifeways. The idea for a cultural center stemmed from this desire to maintain the culture and traditions of the Mdewakanton Dakota people. Through the hard work and dedication of many SMSC members, the tribe began planning a cultural center for its people in 1993. Several decades later, after countless hours of planning and preparation by tribal leadership and members of the Culture and History Preservation Work Group, the SMSC broke ground on Hocokata Tea in October 2016.
HTG and its design firm partners have had a long-standing relationship with the community. In its time, we've worked on a vast majority of their projects over the last 30 years. It's in that time that we've been hearing from the leadership and the community members for the desire of this project.
We needed a place where we can do our little wachipis, where we could preserve our history, where we could store and preserve artifacts, and we housed all of that in this building.
The 88,000 square foot building, which means lodge at the center of the camp in Dakota, offers opportunities to practice Mdewakanton Dakota culture and values, while sharing our history and lifeways with neighbors, friends, and visitors. Upon entering the building, guests can purchase tickets to the public exhibit inside the library and gift shop. This space also offers an abundance of unique items and resources for visitors to peruse before or after their exhibit experience. The gift shop houses a variety of Dakota-inspired items, including beaded and quilled crafts and supplies, sage, blankets, native-made jewelry and artwork, books, and more. Sharing the space with the gift shop sits a carefully curated library for SMSC members and employees to explore. Though compact in size, the library boasts a remarkable collection of Native authors, historical texts, and other culturally relevant books and documents. One of the main intentions of preserving objects and stories at Hocokata Tea is to share them with visitors through the building's 3,805 square foot public exhibit, titled Mdewakanton, Dwellers of the Spirit Lake. This unique exhibit provides visitors with a cultural experience that enhances their knowledge and understanding of the Mdewakanton Dakota people and their history. The exhibit features galleries, artifacts, and stories of the Dakota people.
How mitakayapi. Tshunko pia makiapelo kowichashoyate he mataha. Hello, my relatives. I am your friendly cultural interpreter, Michael Kurtz. My Lakota name is Tshunko P. Wounded Horse, and I'm here to take you on a virtual tour of the exhibit today. This entire gallery is 3,805 square feet and starts with a computer interactive mapping Dakota places using the Duran map as a guide that illustrates Minnesota as a Dakota place. Following this section is an immersive theater experience depicting creation stories and runs about 6 to 8 minutes. This digital illustration tells some of the Dakota creation stories, which is projected onto the walls of a room representing the interior of a teepee. The setting is centered around a campfire and utilizes our community elders for the voices of these stories. Upon exiting the theater is a section displaying our local Jeffers petroglyphs and 5 Hawks effigy mounds. This area is adjacent to our summer bark lodge, which displays the pre-contact era. On the right of the Bark Lodge, we have created an opening to a window which allows guests to view the lower level collections room located in an area off limits to the general public. The fall season comes next, including a ricing diorama displaying our dugout canoe from Lake Minnetonka. An audio interactive draws you to the teepee storytelling winter experience, and spring finishes up the seasons with tapping for maple syrup. Throughout these areas, audio welcomes the visitor with greetings in Dakota to each seasonal section. 2 murals depicting summer and fall, winter and spring activities are displayed as a backdrop to these dioramas. Throughout the gallery is our river case, which was designed to represent the river and waterways vital to the Dakota people. It houses 55 objects from both our own collections and all known from the National Museum of American Indian, with one from a private collector. The conflict and challenge area, which is 1/3 of our exhibit gallery, begins with the treaties and land loss section. Visitors enter the space under an arbor duplicated from the Traverse des Sioux Treaty signing of 1851. The Dakota War of 1862 incorporates interactive exhibit panels with recorded audio that utilizes the voices of members that are direct descendants from prominent figures of the Dakota War. This leads to the internment camp at Fort Snelling and the boarding school era. The next area is dedicated to early reservation life in Shakopee, titled Coming Together, allowing the visitor to experience life in the early 60s through a replica of a community member's mobile trailer. This era addresses the many hardships Native people endured while fighting to exercise our sovereign rights with limited access to government services to build economic opportunity and develop infrastructure. Coming Together also includes how tribal members lived through their misrepresentation of Native people in local high school sports and activities, as shown by the presence of the Shakopee Letterman jacket and the Indians mascot. The final section is concluded by Our Community Today, focusing on self-sustaining community with tribal gaming and eventual passage of the Indian Gaming Regulatory Act. As visitors exit the gallery, they encounter a regalia display and a Generosity Star interactive detailing the many SMSC philanthropic initiatives. The entire room is designed for visitors to encounter the space in a circular manner following the 4 directions. I want to thank you for joining us in our virtual exhibit tour here today. There's no word for goodbye in Dakota, so I want to say Dokshta Ke. We hope to see you again someday here at Hocokata Tea in person.
The community's permanent collection space is capable of storing many artifacts. These sacred items are held in a vault, and the space is outfitted with technology to ensure that the community's most cherished items are protected and secured.
Welcome to Hocokata Tea's collection storage area. This room is 3,390 square feet and houses a total of 10,476 objects. The area is located in the lower level of our facility, which is off limits to the general public. There are 2 windows in this room which provide a level of transparency in our work towards preserving and managing the collection for the general public and the community to see. This was an important concept to designing the space, since previously the collection was housed in a restricted off-site storage area. Although our off-site storage area was modified to provide the safety and security with all the environmental controls in place, it did not adequately give us the square footage for the best standards in museum storage. By acknowledging the need to properly house the collection and engage our members in Dakota material culture, the General Council passed a tribal resolution in 1993 that allocated funding to build a museum. This resolution came as the community purchased a collection from a longtime friend of the Dakota community, Mr. Arlo Hassi, a local collector. The SMSC collection consists of a broad range of objects and materials representing over 130 cultures throughout the United States, northern Mexico, and Canada. 73% of the collection are archaeological objects primarily originating from Dakota ancestral homelands. It is also in the true nature of Dakota people we needed to accommodate a number of buffalo hides, quilts, and large spears. Therefore, through an object survey, we were able to determine the type of museum storage system that best fit our collection and space. Currently, we are the only tribally operated museum in the Midwest that meets the federal and state facility standards as an approved curation site. As such, we will strive to continue to meet these guidelines, which assert our cultural self-determination by rightfully safeguarding our indigenous objects with the traditional care and respect they require.
Through collecting, preserving, exhibiting, and interpreting the SMSC's collection, Hocokata Tea presents Mdewakanton Dakota culture and history through literature, art, music, dance, and interactive educational programming. To help share the story of today's Dakota people with future generations, Hocokata Tea is also bearing a time capsule to be opened in 2070. The SMSC time capsule includes possessions, documents, and photos that community members would like to share with the next generation. The building features a 91-seat theater, which is used for Native film screenings, lectures, and presentations. It can also be booked by SMSC members for movie nights.
My favorite part of this building is the theater, because in their spare time, people and their friends and family can watch movies together.
The cultural activity rooms located in the lower part of the building provide space for a wide array of cultural educational programming for youth and adults alike, including quill work, moccasin making, leather tanning, pottery, regalia making, and more. These classes follow the tradition of Dakota seasonal lifeways. since historically the Dakota people would vary their work to suit the seasons. On the SMSC member-only lower level, the river gallery runs north-south along the entire length of the building, with floor-to-ceiling sage glass windows, comfortable chairs and couches, and exhibit space. The land surrounding the SMSC and Hocokata tea has always been known for its abundance of water, which is reflected in our creation stories. From Badote to Mdewakanton, the water is a consistent symbol of our lifeways as Dakota people and is used as a central element for Hocokata tea. From the river rock that flows throughout the building to the waters near our teepees, water has always been a part of who we are. The stone that you see throughout the building represents the geological history of this land and our relationship with Ina Maka. The 7 teepees that line the building's perimeter represent the Ocheti Shakopee, or the 7 council fires of the Dakota Oyate. The Mdewakanton, dwellers of the Spirit Lake. Wakpekute, shooters among the leaves. Wakpetuan, dwellers among the leaves. Sasituan, dwellers of the Fish Lake. Ihunktuan, dwellers at the end. Ihunktuana, little dwellers at the end. And the Tituan, dwellers of the prairie. The 7 teepees, 3 of which are attached to the building and 4 of which are exterior, are used for cultural purposes. The Youth Teepee provides a designated space for the SMSC's Youth Leadership Council to gather, meet, discuss, and plan for the future.
Hi, my name is Justin Hoy. I'm a facilitator for the Youth Leadership Council. I also serve on the Education Committee here at the Shakopee, Mdewakanton, Sioux community. So in our meeting space, it's in a circle. And with just having something like that, there's no hierarchy of, oh, my opinion matters. It's those little design elements that are so cool. They've also given us space to put our artwork up on the walls. And though they're not there, it's something where you'll see as this place grows and as we grow into the space, that you'll see our artwork, our generation, but then as it grows, other people's.
Having a permanent area devoted to the younger generations and future leaders of the tribe was of utmost importance to the community, as it falls in line with our Dakota tradition of planning 7 generations ahead. The second enclosed teepee is devoted to language learning, another top priority of the SMSC. The Dakota language is one of the nation's most endangered, and the SMSC has worked tirelessly towards its preservation and revitalization. The language teepee provides a permanent space for language instruction, and tribal members of all ages are welcome to join in the daily classes offered in the space. The third and final enclosed teepee is the Honor Teepee, designated for members of the tribe's business council to hold meetings, host visiting dignitaries, and tend to the tribe's priorities and business matters. The place of gathering is Hocokata Tea's largest feature, standing 50 feet tall and measuring 9,881 square feet. The circular space is large enough to accommodate the growth of the community, and has a capacity of up to 1,200 people. The place of gathering hosts general council meetings and other large community member events.
My favorite part of Hocokata Tea is a place of gathering because it gives me a place to dance and sing with my friends and family.
The Hall of Dakota, which is located directly below the 19-foot wide glass medicine wheel skylight, provides the community a place to honor and remember Dakota leaders and community members who have journeyed to the spirit world. The space is also dedicated to SMSC veterans and active members of the U.S. Armed Forces. The facility also features a community dining room with a full kitchen for community-sponsored events, indigenous food classes, private gatherings, and more. The grounds upon which Hocokata Tea sits also offers community families a number of specialized areas to take part in their Dakota culture. The grounds outside the facility were designed to pay tribute to our Dakota ancestors who lived in this area centuries ago. Sitting among the restored native prairie lands and trails, there are 4 separate gardens with designated purposes for meditation and growing medicinal herbs and edible native plants. A pondside patio provides access for canoeing, while the rest of the grounds features space for archery, reflection, and cultural activities. The site of the building itself is less than 5 miles away from Tinta Otunwe, village of the prairie, a traditional summer planting village of the Mdewakanton leader Shakopee. Although the features of Hocokata Tea will allow the community to engage in culture and art, the building is more than just a gathering space for the SMSC. It represents resiliency, hope, determination, and the ingenuity of a people that have endured centuries of hardships. It is a building that represents the history of the Dakota people. Hocokata Tea was built to celebrate our values in all generations of Dakota people, and it will continue to symbolize perseverance, hope, and thankfulness for the next 7 generations. We are here, we are Dakota.
Okay, so does anyone have any questions?
And I did notice, Lydia, that there were a number of questions in the group chat.
Yeah, I noticed that too. Somehow when we went to other forum, that whole screen went away from me, but here it is now. Hold on.
I have a question.
Oh, there it is. Okay.
Go ahead, Tim.
I'm really interested in this culture, well, work groups in general, but specifically this culture and historic preservation work group. What exactly was their role? Who makes up that group? How many? Is it a group that sees everything through from beginning to end, or just cultural and historic preservation? Or maybe you've got other work groups for other aspects of the facility, of the whole operation and everything that went into putting everything together.
Well, that's why I mentioned in the welcome is that for the most part, you know, the community, obviously in the room where they can provide their input, there were community meetings, but for the most part, since I've been on this project, it's been the Culture and Historic Preservation Work Group.
How many members are there?
13 to, how many members are on the work group?
Yeah.
13 to 15 have been on, but I'd say, you know, it was countless hours of, you know, essentially a part-time job for a bit there. Probably a dedicated, I don't know, Josh and Rob, probably what, like 6 to 8. One of the unique structures of the community involvement piece was, I know with other tribes, they provide a stipend. This was all volunteer based. And, you know, we did see some people kind of come and go, and that could kind of, you know, have its challenges as well, since, you know, for the most part, you're kind of stepping back a little bit, trying to teach other people about where you're at in the project. And so that can be a fun challenge too. But for the most part, we had a dedicated, you know, core 6 to 7. And those were the people that you've seen in that attended the various site museums that Worth Group had taken them on in the Southwest.
And what kind of issues and matters do they deal with?
Well, in the beginning, it was, you know, design and the development and working on, initially, before I came on board, they were a part of my hire. So when I was brought into the project, shortly before our construction documents were getting approved, they were a part of me on the interview team. So I interviewed with a team of close to 14 community members for this position, but that was kind of it after that. For the most part, it's been just programming and making those types of decisions with the design as well.
Okay, thanks.
I was going to add to that. I know there was an earlier chat question regarding programming development. You know, if the programming was already set before we started, or if it was developed along the way. And there were some aspects that the community desired, but I would say it was absolutely developed along the way. You know, exactly what they were looking for, what aspects of the what aspects they wanted to include in the facility. And part of that, I think, and Brian can probably add a little bit more to that, or Rob, but came out of the tours of those other facilities. And then also just getting a feel for what the other facilities had, and if that was something that they wanted to include here. That's out of those tours is really where the idea of a museum, gift shop, library, having a capacity for public use of the space really kind of came out of. And then everything kind of crafted from that, so that they ended up with that kind of more programmatic development for the architectural side.
Oh, I had asked that question. I was just asking because we're in the middle of a design process for my tribe, the Crow tribe, for a cultural center. And so the programming, it just seemed like you guys had a very tight timeline when you started January 8th, and by February 19th, you had, all these concepts. I'm trying to understand how in 1 month you had visited all those sites, created a program, and generated, concepts. It was pretty fast. So I was just trying to get a handle on how that was done. And that seemed to kind of drive the whole direction of the thing. So it seemed like there's a really fast process up front, or was there a lot, was that kind of building on a bunch of previous work that had been done in terms of what would go in the building?
I think I would agree with Josh that the tours were very inspirational, very educational, and community members that were on the tours were evaluating what they were experiencing in those other facilities and what felt appropriate for their community. The design process was very fast. I had forgotten how fast it was until I started revisiting all those wonderful PowerPoints. But we had to have, I think you touched on the key issue. We just completed the master plan the previous year.
Oh, and so, you did the master plan as well?
Yes. So we were, the cultural center had been in discussion with us since 2013.
I got you. That helped to understand the speed.
Right.
And the CHP, members really did facilitate and give us a lot of information up front. I think there was also a question of, what came first, the charrette or some of the concepts. That information allowed us to put some concepts together. We also had an internal charrette where we developed some of those drawings and articulated displays that Brian showed, the bison, the feather, and those helped to generate some initial ideas paired with the site tours, and then bringing community members in on the actual charrette kind of to get their thoughts of the specific site and what they wanted for site related or internal programming elements. It kind of all culminated together and gave us a big melting pot that we can kind of work from and then work fairly quickly.
Could you explain, just because I've worked in this way before, the way that you structure the design architect and the architect of record, how that played out in your overall structure and in terms of leading the design?
Yeah, I can talk to that a little bit. Again, we were asked to, being the architect of record on many other projects for the community, we were asked to kind of take on that role, take that design, that work group, and we were part of that design, but it was really a break at SD, kind of halfway through DD, I would say. The work group was leading the charge through that SD phase, getting the, kind of some of the interior pieces pulled together, getting the conceptual pieces pulled together. And when we switched gears into more design development, more construction, processes, timing, costing, things of that nature, exterior envelope, that's when our role kind of switched over and we went into full management of that process. So that's kind of where our break was, kind of somewhere. I mean, it was certainly more than SD, but it wasn't, it was towards the end of DD when we made that big switch.
Right. And why was there a design architect? Was Worth Group more familiar with the building type or
yeah, correct. Yep.
Or what?
And we had also conceptualized the 4 principal structures on the master plan in 2013.
Wow.
We had conceptualized education center, government center, health center, and cultural center. The design was completely different, but therein lies the beginning of the design process back in the master plan.
Yeah. Great. And sorry to dominate here, but the other question I asked earlier was, I think some other people are asking, could you give us a sense of the budget? Both, were you given a budget, or did you generate the concept design and then say, hey, this is what it's going to cost to build what you want? And what was that? What was the overall construction budget and square footage of the project?
From our perspective, I know some of the early concepts, we went through some pricing exercises and estimating, and we got to a level that was uncomfortable for the community to fund as a project. And so that kind of started to bring us down a little bit. I don't remember the exact process back in 2014, but we went through some real early designs, kind of pre some of the stuff we showed you today, that got us to a level of like 120,000 square feet and, cost per square foot numbers that were pushing the limits of, closer to $100 million project. And that was not in the comfort zone, I'll call it, of this project. And so we were asked to tighten that up, not only from some square footage discussion, but, I don't know at this point. There was an overall project budget kind of established by the general counsel and supported by the business council back in 2014. And Lydia, I'm not sure if I'm at liberty to share that, so I won't. If you want to share that, you can. But, and then that, as part of that, that was all of our soft costs. That was, some of the build out, that was exhibits, that was, everything else. And then the construction was part of that as well, and design fees. So I helped manage with Lydia the whole project budget, as it were, from the project perspective. But yes, the design team was given a number to work towards from a construction perspective as part of that. And that's that whole part of going through the SD and DD phase. There was a lot of give and take. There was a lot of effort going through the group trying to decide, what were important parts to keep, what could be adjusted, how can we simplify costs or take some costs out. If you saw some of the contextual images early, there was a green roof on the project. And we ultimately had to take that out because it didn't fit within the budget. It was a nice thing to have, but ultimately at the end of the day, it wasn't something that was going to get funded if we wanted a lot of the other pieces and parts to stay in. So hope that answers your question.
Sure. I don't know if you're willing to, if anyone's willing to share the actual budget just for the tribes we're working with. It would give them a good sense of what they need to start thinking about in terms of, I think your scale is way bigger than what we're thinking of, but just to have an understanding. 55 million was the construction budget?
Yep.
Or project budget?
Project.
Yep.
And what was the final square footage of the project?
88 or 83,000.
Yeah, 88,000 is what I remember hearing in the video.
And the exhibit space is 3,800 square feet.
I saw that the exhibit space is kind of a fraction of the overall building. So would you?
And that's why I mentioned, community access and public access.
Yeah.
So when I first came onto this project, it was not open to the public at all. It was only determined afterwards during the groundbreaking that, the upper level was going to be open to the public.
Well,
and so it's only essentially 1/3 of the building that's open to the public.
I got you. This is a big question we're struggling with the Nisqually tribe and the Crow tribe. What's public versus community, and how much of this is a community facility? And that answers that question. I think it's really, we've been actually talking about even splitting the facilities into one kind of out near the battlefield for the public and one on the Little Bighorn College campus for the community, you know, for the cultural center aspects. But you split it up by floor, it sounds like. So one floor is public and then the other two are private or just for tribal members.
Yeah, so we were in the, if you remember some of the displays in the presentation I had, we were able to basically use the topography as the split. So everything at that lower level or that main level is community. And then that upper level, separate parking lot entrance for public. The community can also use that entry in that parking lot, but really kind of contain more to that aspect of it, where it also got a little bit tricky on some of the site elements. So, you know, providing some connectivity to those different spaces so the community members can go from point A to point B seamlessly, but not making it in such a way that it's like, oh, there's a trail, let's go hop on that. So working kind of very distinctly to make that perceived barrier, even though there's not a physical barrier there.
I think that's really a clever way of dealing with it. You know, there's been concern on the part of some in our projects that, you know, like at a university center in Missoula, that the students there, like they didn't want to feel on display themselves. Like when people come to visit, like as tribal members, they don't want non-Indian students showing up and saying, hey, where's the Indians? Let's go look at them. And so there was that kind of whole tension there. And and they did the same, we did the same thing. We had the upper level is just like students only, lower level is access for the public. But that's very clever. You even separated the parking areas. I really think that's a good idea. And was that a big stress of the community, saying that they wanted that kind of separation and privacy for their own cultural activities?
I would say yes.
Yes, it is. It is, and it's a continuous challenge. Like I mentioned earlier in my presentation, I mean, it's a beautiful space. We constantly get people wandering around back here. You know, we constantly get people that, you know, because they're part of the tour and providing those amenities for these larger tour groups that were coming in when we first opened. You know, it's great to be able to take them through the river gallery and down the stairs and into the classrooms, but they get deterred and they want to be snapping pictures and, you know, they're in the way. And I think one of the important things that to know about the community is they're very private. And so having the general public, you know, racing through their areas isn't what, you know, is even deemed anywhere near appropriate. But we wanted to be able to accommodate them. So, you know, we all knew that, okay, if we're going to have a group of, you know, a classroom of third graders, that it's important that they go through the elevator and they can go in a different path to get to the classroom versus going through the river gallery.
Yeah. Do you like the idea of potentially splitting it into two separate structures, like one kind of more public area, you know, entirely separating it, or does it work well to be all combined in terms of the operations and all of that?
I don't know if I could answer that, because then it's definitely two different projects. And I think that's what's unique about this one is it keeps it, you know, I couldn't even imagine having to manage two different buildings, you know, because we have the collections, we have the vaults, we've got, you know, community programming, we have the place of gathering where we're having council meetings on a regular basis, you know, so I guess it's just, and you know, keeping people from wanting to wander around is just one of the vital reasons why we needed to have security on site too.
And you wanted the public there both to share the stories of your people, but is it also an economic benefit to the building? Do you get any cash flow from their visits?
We do charge. We charge a fee for the tours. I think for the most part, the most revenue generating is the gift shop. it isn't necessarily a key point to this project. Like I mentioned, this was started off as something for the community. But being that we are the only tribally operated museum in the state, and this close to the Minneapolis, I don't know if we mentioned it earlier, but we are only 35 miles from Minneapolis.
Oh, wow.
So that makes that kind of key that, you know, we get that kind of traffic flow. The casino is about 3 miles down the road from here. We've got a large amusement park. Well, pre-COVID, you know, this was a pretty busy kind of area, but yeah, it comes with that its own unique challenges, and you know, how much information are we going to provide the public, and how much do we, you know, keep to ourselves?
Right.
We're running a little bit over. Does anyone else have questions before we end the session? Have we looked at Lydia, did you look at the list of questions that people typed in? Have we addressed those?
Yeah, I know there was one that asked what the tribal membership was. That we hadn't necessarily answered.
I think that it's published on somewhere. The census was at 600.
600 members.
Mm-hmm.
And then there was one Gwen had put in original funding source, yearly budget, percentage of annual budget, other funding sources.
Tribally governed source, sole source. We currently aren't grant operated at all. And let's see. I can't see what the other one was.
Your budget, your annual budget.
1.5.
Okay, thanks. How about your restaurant operations? Is it open to the public, and was it the intention?
We don't have a restaurant.
Oh, you don't? Okay, I thought you did. Okay, that's
yeah. So there is an internal cafe that is for community members only.
Oh, yeah. So that's kind of what you were referring to. Yes, we have a community kitchen, but that's on the lower level. So that's community only.
Okay, so it's not like menu service or anything.
Nope.
Okay, good to know. Any other questions? Well, it was an amazing presentation. Thank you, Lydia, Josh, Carolyn, Rob, and Brian. An amazing job. It's an amazing facility, and thanks for sharing it with us.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Good work,
Great
everyone.
on the project.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a good day.
Take care.
Thanks again.
Bye.